Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. Tonight, we have very interesting developments to talk about, primarily with the recent declaration coming from Yahya Sari', the spokesperson of Ansarullah, that Yemen began, not will begin, Yemen began its operations to impose an embargo against Israel. Yemen gave a deadline to Israel 4 days ago, and today they told them we will resume the operations once the deadline finishes. No response from Israel. The blockade was still active, and Israel was still preventing aid from going in to the Gaza Strip. Therefore, Yemen declared that they began the operations, and indeed they started to impose a blockade now on any Israeli or Israeli linked ship going to Israel. So we had a couple of reports. One of the most important reports is the declaration that came from Yahya Sari' saying that there is a ban on the ships going to Israel. So this came out in the Ansarullah website, and he also had a statement, Yahya Sari', saying that that's it. From now on, we are having a ban on any Israeli ships passing through the Red Sea and the Arabian Seas. So they said the armed forces affirmed in a statement that in the framework of support and victory for the injustice of the Palestinian people and their dear mujahideen, and after the expire of the specified period of the deadline granted by Sayyid Abdul Malik Badruddin al-Houthi, may God protect him, that's the leader of Ansarullah, to the mediators to push and pressure the Israeli enemy to reopen the crossings and allow entry of aid into the Gaza Strip, and giving the inability of the mediators to achieve this, they announced the resumption of the ban on the passage of all Israeli ships in the designated operations area in the Red and Arabian Seas, as well as Bab al-Mandeb and the Gulf of Aden. It's not just the Red Sea. It clarified that this ban will take effect from the time of announcing this statement. The armed forces added that any Israeli vessel attempting to violate this ban will be targeted within the declared operational area, stressing that this ban will remain in place until the crossings in Gaza Strip are reopened and aid, food, and medicine are allowed in. The Yemeni armed forces saluted the steadfast Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and affirmed that with God's help, they will stand with the valiant Palestinian resistance. And this was the video that came from Yahya Sari' declaring the military operation coming from Ansarullah. Now, what does all of this mean, and where things are going? And does this mean that all of a sudden that's it, everything is going to explode? Well, we have to bear in mind a couple of things. Number one, Yemen, and it's important to highlight that again, Yemen is the only country now that is putting these ultimatums to Israel, and is the only country outside of Palestine directly participating in not only diplomatic, in military actions, taking military actions against the genocide state, and this time not for an attack, but for a blockade. Now, this was expected because previously Ansarullah, they started off by saying that all of their actions in the past 15 months are there to stop the genocide in Gaza, but shortly after, they started to add a sentence to their military declarations. And that sentence included ending the genocide and lifting the siege of the Gaza Strip. That meant that even if Israel stopped the war or the genocide in Gaza and then continued to have a blockade, they will resume operations. That wasn't the case after the ceasefire began. despite breaches coming from Israel, because aid was going in. There were breaches about the numbers of aid, levels of aid, some aid not going in, but the majority of the aid was getting into the Gaza Strip. But now, a few days ago, Israel, that said, they stopped getting all aid in, which meant that Ansarullah are now in a position to start attacking Israel. So this blockade that Israel is imposing on Gaza for now is only met with a blockade from Ansarullah. Ansarullah weren't only restricting their actions against Israel on a blockade, although that was the most effective one in general. It led to the port of Eilat declaring bankruptcy. The economic situation in Israel became totally a massive failure. They were degraded twice by Moody's, and it was very effective. However, they also attacked Israel with missiles, with drones, and they attacked sensitive military and strategic and security locations inside of Israel. So for now, this doesn't mean that Ansarullah are going to be attacking Israel. They're only going to be having this blockade in the Red Sea for now. However, if Israel does not adhere to their demands, and everyone's demands really, to open the Gaza borders and allow all aid in, they will continue this, and who knows, they might escalate. But based on what we know so far, no direct attacks on Israel as, the territorial place, are expected for the meantime. In the meantime, we're expected to see these attacks, and they already began. So Ansarullah said the blockade is already taking place. The ultimatum finished, it expired, and now we're taking action. And again, Yemen is the only country that's doing that. How can this affect the negotiations? And how does this affect the mediators? How does that affect the United States and the countries supporting Israel who also tried to reach an agreement and even participated in the genocide coalition in Gaza? How is it going to affect all of them and the path to end the war in Gaza? Well, to know that, we need to know where the ceasefire agreement reached, where things are looking to go, and what's happening on the ground. There is a very big difference between certain things that are being spoken about and actually being implemented to a large extent, especially with the United States talks with the Palestinian resistance directly, with Hamas, Benjamin Netanyahu showing discontent, not being happy with that, many in Israel criticizing it. But the talks are that, no, we're going to negotiations. Hamas today said that that's it. Phase 2 talks began to end the war. But in the meantime, there are very dangerous things happening on the ground, including an escalation with Egypt. But before I get to the escalation with Egypt, that included a direct attack from Israel on an Egyptian vehicle with an Egyptian operative, I'm going to talk to you about the breaches that are happening with Israel. So, in Gaza, in the past 24 hours, there have been reports of 15 martyrs in multiple attacks. And that's despite the fact that the ceasefire should continue. But 6 were reported to be killed in Gaza and Rafah. But there were also attacks in the Netzarim corridor that were not mentioned in this report here, but from independent journalists inside of Gaza. Israel carrying out these attacks. Most of these attacks are happening with drones, not with like with F-16s or whatever. So targeted, deliberate strikes, and in many cases intended to do harm to these people or send a message. For example, the attack on the food warehouses to increase the problems that they have with food with the Israeli blockade. Israel used the starvation as a war crime, and they're still using the aid as leverage. It's criminal offenses being taken war crimes being taken on a day-to-day basis. But it didn't end here. It didn't end here. Israel is breaching. There are talks to go ahead. Netanyahu is not happy with the United States speaking with Hamas. But Hamas are saying that the talks are positive. And for the first time, well, something similar to that happened before, but not to this level. We are hearing statements coming both from the United States and from Hamas that are more aligned than the tone that we're hearing between the US administration and Israel. How? Well, both Israel and both Hamas and the United States are talking about the need to end the war. So far, Hamas was the only side keen on that. Just weeks ago, even Witkoff himself was saying, it's tricky, but we do want to go into phase 2. But Adam Bowler, he made another statement saying that we spoke with Hamas and we both agree about the need to go into phase 2 and the need to end the war. That is making the Israeli side not happy. Primarily Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu and his surroundings are showing a lot of anger towards this talk. Even some of their media outlets inside of Israel, many are calling it not only negative, but also dangerous for Israel that Hamas and the United States are talking directly. And the path that both Hamas and the United States are talking seems to be the path that will be actually going ahead. However, on the ground, things are tense. Things are very, very tense. And they're not only tense because of the Israeli refusal and arrogance with the aid and all of that. It's very tense and it's very problematic because Israel targeted an Egyptian vehicle in North Gaza, and they wounded the Egyptian driver. This took place several days back on the 8th. Some reports started to come up today, but it happened. What happened exactly? So this report said 7 Palestinians and Egyptian citizens were injured on Saturday afternoon in an airstrike that targeted an Egyptian bulldozer in the city of Beit Hanun. Beit Hanun is the most northern city of the Gaza Strip. That was the first city to be almost wholly destroyed back in late October, early November 2023. They targeted this Egyptian bulldozer carrying out work on the ground to remove the rubble. This was the only thing that they're doing. Why did Israel do that? And of course, the bulldozer raising an Egyptian flag as well. Why did Israel do that? Well, they said that the bulldozer and the people, they were digging to plant bombs. They were digging to plant bombs without any, without any proof. Why? Because what attacked this vehicle was a drone. A man was controlling this drone, and they have cameras. They see what they're attacking, and they attack them deliberately. So that drone that was controlled by the Israeli army or whoever operated it from Israel saw that there's a bulldozer, saw it had an Egyptian flag, saw that the worker was Egyptian, alongside Palestinians just trying to remove some of the rubble, and maybe find some bodies, by the way, thousands of bodies still under the rubble, and Israel preventing the equipment, and so that's affecting the evacuation and the removal of these bodies, of Israelis even, by the way. Okay. They saw it deliberately, and they deliberately targeted him, knowing that he was an Egyptian. This is a direct blow to Egypt from Israel. It's as if they're instigating them, pushing them to try and do something, because things are going towards de-escalation. The US administration is showing signs of keenness to reach a ceasefire with their talks with the Palestinian resistance as well. Well, the direct talks with Hamas. And they're trying to cause friction with Egypt. The big confirmation here is that they intended to do that, of course. But the most important thing that happened is what happened after that. There weren't many reports about the figures that were involved in talks with Israel. However, close figures to the Egyptian authorities mentioned that the Egyptian head of intelligence, he went to Israel. The Egyptian head of intelligence went to Israel to meet with certain senior figures who are in charge of all of this, and one of them was Ron Dermer. And during that conversation, there was actually a report about that too. During that conversation, they were raising the problems to do with Israeli attacks, and one of the things that were mentioned is by Dermer, hold on a second, even when we talk about ending the war, we want to end the war, but we want to also, the Palestinians need to get out of Gaza. And it's as if they're doing this to try and add more pressure on Egypt, who has been very opposing of this idea of the Palestinians being expelled. After he mentioned that, Ron Dermer apparently told him, the Egyptians don't mind the Palestinians going into Gaza. It appears to be that just the Egyptian government is having this problem. And after Ron Dermer said that, apparently things went downhill. The Egyptian official, again reportedly the head of intelligence of Egypt, started raising his voice at him, shouting at him, and he demanded him again to come for a further meeting in Egypt to meet with more senior figures. However, the most senior figures in Israel and Egypt, they're not talking. Sisi and Netanyahu. There's a cut between them, despite all of the peace treaty and what have you. And of course, that's a very dangerous thing. As a matter of fact, the Egyptian government, the head of the state in Egypt, the president, he's not speaking with the US administration as well. But the relevant bodies in both countries are talking to try and diffuse and try and de-escalate. Israel is becoming more and more angry with Egypt, not only because of their position with Gaza, it's because their proposals for Gaza are being embraced by other countries. Firstly, being embraced by the majority, if not all, of the Arab countries, who showed a very big backing to this plan with the Arab summit in Cairo. But now there was another confirmation from the EU. The EU is saying that we should actually now help Egypt. We should help Egypt, and we refuse all of the attempts to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from Gaza. Meaning, Israel is becoming more and more secluded. Its traditional allies from Europe, they're not taking a position that is friendly with Israel. The United States is talking directly with Hamas. Yeah, many statements are completely reprehensible, but they're still talking with them. And it's finding itself on its own, really. So long as they're still committing these crimes and they're not really going ahead with the ceasefire they agreed upon, many more countries are turning against them. But still, they have this arrogance. Benjamin Netanyahu is still keen on, being shady and not being very clear. However, the tide is turning against Israel and they do not like it. Now, what's the prospect of this leading to a further escalation between Egypt and Israel? A slight chance, but the thing that's happening here between Egypt and Israel, and that's the most dangerous thing, is that the tensions between them have only been rising. They haven't been reducing. Ever since this war began, ever since the genocide began, Israel went against everything that Egypt even wanted. And they had certain attacks. People were killed from both sides. It was quickly diffused, but Israel's consistent breach of everything that they had agreed upon, and their constant escalations and their barbaric crimes, they only raise tensions further and further with Egypt. Egypt does not want a war. But what they're doing on the ground in Sinai is proving that they are only preparing for a war. And Israel is constantly pushing and pushing and pushing and attacking. And this direct attack, although the Egyptian vehicle driver, by the way, he wasn't killed. He wasn't killed. He was still alive, but he was wounded. He was wounded, and there were martyrs. And again, that was deliberate. That drone was controlled, and the man knew who he was attacking. But all of that raises the prospect of having an escalation at one point where Egypt will just say, okay, we've had enough. We've really had enough, and we're not going to keep you on our borders. So very tense situation. And the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the Palestinian Authority. You see, the Palestinian Authority, they've been having these statements lately. Firstly, during this whole genocide, they've been trying to gain from the genocide, gain from the fact that, well, we can try and do something because, you know, the Palestinian cause is on a rise. People are talking about it, and we need to gain the benefits. They didn't want to speak properly with the Palestinian side, with the other Palestinian political parties, always saying that they want to control Gaza after the war all of a sudden, although they don't have popularity even in the West Bank, refusing calls to unite the front by mediation from China and Russia and other countries too. Even Algeria had a go, until they were blaming the Palestinian resistance of being responsible for the genocide, and then having these campaigns against the Palestinian resistance. And now, despite the fact that there has been a de-escalation and an agreement between the Palestinian resistance in the West Bank and the authority of the West Bank, they're continuing with their moves against the Palestinian resistance. So a few days back, I shared an image of a guy who they targeted. They actually imprisoned him, and he was wanted by Israel. And when they were imprisoning him, they started to humiliate him, to beat him, to ask him to say very offensive things, very, a dehumanizing way. And now they killed a Palestinian resistance fighter. They killed this man, Abdurrahman Abu Muna. The Palestinian Authority forces, they killed him in Jenin. Now, not surprising, again, it shows you how, well, despicable the Palestinian Authority is. And it also shows you that, well, it doesn't matter about the talks that are happening now. They have one position, and that one position is against the Palestinian side. It's not against Israel. Despite talks, despite the fact that there was a reconciliation happening between them and the Palestinian resistance in Jenin, brokered by some people within the community, committees of, having peaceful relations between the two, they are still targeting these people and doing the work on behalf of Israel. This is the important bit. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank is doing the work on behalf of Israel and targeting these Palestinian men fighting an occupation, something that is enshrined in international law. It's just that the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank chooses not to adopt it. Why? Because, well, their existence depends on them actually not embracing anything as such. And they're still continuing with this. What does this mean to the day after in Gaza? There are talks about the day after in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority potentially taking a role inside of Gaza after the war finishes. The Palestinian resistance saying, we're willing to talk with them. However, the agreement must include everyone, not just them. It shouldn't be on their terms. they shouldn't dictate everything that happens in Gaza. And the Palestinian Authority is rejecting. Abu Mazen himself, he's saying that no, the Palestinian Authority should control everything. Gaza was part of the Palestinian Authority, and he wants to return the situation to pre-2006, before there were elections inside of Gaza. This is making things more difficult because, well, the Palestinian resistance is condemning it. All of the Palestinian political groups, they condemned the assassination of this man. And they're calling it a dangerous escalation as well, an act of betrayal. An act of betrayal against the resistance, not just an attack of betrayal against the resistance. It's an act of betrayal against the whole Palestinian people, not just against the resistance, killing people who made no crime whatsoever. That makes things more difficult for them to be involved in Gaza in the day after. And it looks like things are already on a way to exclude the Palestinian Authority from Gaza, by the way, because the fact that Hamas is talking with the United States and we are looking to see a solution inside of Gaza that will potentially include a committee that would be agreed upon by the Palestinians in Gaza. All of that shows that the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank will probably have no role to play. And their continuation of these attacks shows exactly which side they're on in the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. And again, welcome everyone to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. We'll take some questions for the following part with the limited time that we have. In the meantime, if you wouldn't mind highlighting, of course, any questions or comments you have for me. Let's go to the beginning of the chat, see if we had anything from the beginning. And thank you so much, everyone who is participating in the chat. And okay, Samba Boy, thank you so much for your super. You said, can you speak about the news about Christian Shia family being executed in Tartus and Ansarullah is condemned? Why isn't HTS in the south instead of the west? Well, we've been speaking about the situation in Syria for the past couple of days with more clarification coming from people on the ground. There have been confirmed breaches both from the government forces, but these breaches started from the Assad loyalists as confirmed by the SNHR, which I spoke about intensively a couple of days ago. And the situation is reducing now. So it's not that there's not much escalation at the moment. Now, in Tartus in particular, many of the reports, and of course we need to understand these reports, there were undeniably breaches and there were undeniable massacres, and all of them are of course condemned and reprehensible. It doesn't matter where they come from, whether from the new Syrian government or anyone aligned with them, or from anyone opposing them. The act itself should be condemned, and it is indeed condemned. However, what we do need to realize, and that's something that I have always been asking people to do if they're interested in knowing the true reality of what's happening in Syria because of its complexity, its intense complexity, is to follow the news that they're getting from multiple sources, things from the ground, and not necessarily be dragged into the feed that they're constantly getting. For example, some of the information that we started to receive has been debunked by certain people. And let me show you a few videos confirming that. There were a couple of people on, and of course, we can't share anything too graphic here. But let's say for example, you said Christian massacres, okay? And I came across this video from a Syrian channel today in Latakia, who was speaking with Christian families again, and I'm pretty sure you haven't seen that video, but of course that's why we're here to share it. That's the video that came today from Christians in Latakia.
يعني احنا من زمان متعايشين مع بعضنا، والشعب اللي حوالينا اكثر من رائع، يعني عايشين مثل الاهل، ونشكر الله ما حدا تعرض لما حدا هيدا، وكل واحد بيأمن مثلا احتياجات الثاني. يعني
بس نحن ما حد ضايقنا ابدا من اللي جايين ابدا. يعني مره من هون نازل بدي اقطع، عم وقف لي، قلت له ماما انت مخالف، قال لي على راسي حقك علي، ما بعرف انا جاي من ادلب من حلب، ما بعرف شو قال لي، هيك جاوبني بالحرف الواحد. بقول عنهم انه والله ظلمونا او شيء، ما فيني اقول، ما فيني شيء.
Clear. The Syrian channel from Latakia speaking with Christians who saw cars from Idlib and other provinces coming in, not bothering them, being fine with them. Okay. Again, that doesn't debunk the fact that there were other reports, but it's showing that there are more complexities to this situation. Do you understand? And there were more people also speaking about being framed and being included in certain things that didn't really happen to them. Like there was once this lady, there was a report inside of Syria that she was actually killed. And then she had to come up with a video confirming that she wasn't. And let's see if we can find that video for you. This woman here.
أنا بحال توتر شديد، وهلا سمعت إنه عم يستخدموا الفيديو تبعي بطريقة لأني أنا مقتولة وإنه عائلتي مقتولة. يا جماعة رجاء انشروا الفيديو، طمنوا العالم، العالم بحالة زار. اللي صار دخلوا عالم دخلوا بطريقة جدا
No, this one was without the translation. Let's see if we have the one with the translation of that same woman. She had families, members of her family being killed. And she went out with a video to debunk some of the claims that were being made against her. This is the version that's translated in English.
يا جماعة رجاء أنا بحال توتر شديد، وهلا سمعت إنه عم يستخدموا الفيديو تبعي بطريقة لأني أنا مقتولة وإنه عائلتي مقتولة. يا جماعة رجاء انشروا الفيديو، طمنوا العالم، العالم بحالة زار. اللي صار دخلوا عالم خلعوا باب البناية، هدول العالم لا نن أمن ولا نن هيئة، تمام؟ دخلوا بطريقة جدا عنيفة، ونحن عالم بارح من عائلتنا في 7 أشخاص راحوا بمجزرة حي القصور ببانياس. نحن بحالة ذعر شديد حاليا، في لنا معارفنا وناسنا اجوا طلعونا من البناية بعد وقت قصير، هن طلعوا من البناية، تمام؟ والامن العام انا واثقه انه العالم كلها حكيت معه من جبلة ومن برا جبلة، لانه انا عرفت بعدين انه هذا البث المباشر انتشر حتى برا سوريا. يا جماعه انا طلعت وحكيت كلمتين بالفيديو انه اذا صار علينا شيء لا تخلوا دمنا يروح هدر، وربوا اولادكم بقى يحبوا بعض، ما تكونوا بغباء جيلنا كان غبي، روح البلد، ضيع البلد، فرجاء لا تجيشوا الامور، لاني انا لسه يا جماعه رجاء انا بحال توتر شديد، وهلا سمعت انه عم
So again, another woman debunking some of the reports that were made in her name. In her name, we need to understand that. And some people have been publishing also, and I'm talking about people you follow online, by the way. I know some of you follow them. They have publishing fake information about these women, about these people, and also fake reports about statements from the Syrian government. For example, and if you want more examples, this is one of them. This is a statement apparently from the Syrian Arab Republic saying that, and dated on the 8th of March, we prevent everyone from recording or publishing the videos of executions that the movements that are part of the army commit. We prevent anyone from actually taking pictures of the attacks and from any attacks coming from the Syrian army. And it's signed here by the Minister of Defense. People online who you follow with hundreds of thousands of followers published this fake statement without due diligence. You're being misled by massive liars. That's what's happening in Syria. Again, not to say that there were no breaches or were no massacres or were no mistakes that are condemned, regardless of who they came from, whether from the Syrian government or anyone aligned with them, by the way. All of them are condemned and reprehensible. But there is a bigger campaign, and some people are being dragged into this echo chamber of lies just to prove a point. That's what's happening. And unfortunately, that's not helpful for the Syrian people. That's not helpful for the unity of Syria. And you're not doing Syria a favor by being a part of this echo chamber of lies inside of Syria. So we need to have a consistent point and approach with Syria. All crimes against humanity are condemned regardless of who they come from, whether Ashara or his forces or anyone aligned with them, by the way, or anyone else. But we also owe the people the truth. You shouldn't just be focusing on one side here and completely ignoring everything else. Another example, if you would like as well, you would have seen these people. You would have seen these people massacring or committing breaches inside of Syria and recording themselves. And some people circulated videos of them. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen exactly what they've done personally. But what you really don't see, because there were many videos being circulated, including all the videos too. But what you don't see is this: them being arrested by the Syrian government, the same government that belongs to Ashara. So you see the videos of the actual crimes that they commit, and they're, by the way, they're abhorrent crimes. Some crimes that were committed in Syria were abhorrent on people who are counted to be with the government. But again, let's not forget how everything began and contextualize everything to understand the full picture, so that we can do what's best for the Syrian people, for Syria and the Syrian people. We want what's best for Syria. And I am certain, by the way, that some people, when they publish information and talk about Syria, they have good intentions. They absolutely have good intentions. But what they need to understand is you need to do your work. You need to do your due diligence with reporting and before publishing certain things about Syria. Otherwise, you would be part of the misinformation. And this is something that we constantly fight and battle. Misinformation. No matter how hard it is, by the way. And it doesn't matter if this information is coming from people who you've been following for years too. So, and guess what? You will be hearing a lot more of misinformation about Syria, because Syria is under attack. And Syria has been under attack for over 14 years. Syria has been a target for even more than 14 years since the opposition started to take place, and then intervention, and then you had these foreign movements and all of the changes and the intervention of Iran and their armed movements and militias and Russia and all of that, and the American desires in Syria and Israel. The situation is not easy and is not straightforward. And what do you do with a situation that is not as straightforward as you think? You take your time, you be patient with the information that you get, you test it, you cross-check it, you cross-reference everything that you need to do to get the real image. And if we do love Syria, and if we do love the Syrian people, we owe them that. The Syrian people have been through atrocities. We talk about Gaza. I talk about over 10 times what happened in Gaza, in Syria, the destruction to levels that no one can imagine. And of course, if there are certain things that are positive, that are happening by the current government in Syria, we need to speak about them too. For example, agreements with the SDF, agreements with now the Suwaida and some of the Druze armed movements, and the fact that they are imprisoning people like that who were blamed and who were recording themselves committing atrocities inside of Syria. We need to recognize all of these things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing Syria a favor, and we wouldn't be doing the Syrian people a favor. And I hope that clarifies. Let's go to the next one from Splatted. How likely are the Houthis going to attack Syria? It's unlikely for them to attack Syria. They will not be attacking Syria. Ansarullah, their eyes and their operations in the past 15 and 16 months, they are, focusing on Gaza. They're focusing on Gaza. And you need to understand here, in Syria, al-Assad's biggest allies didn't support him. And Assad's main allies were Russia and Iran and Hezbollah at one point, or at least parts of them, because, the support of him wasn't in complete, whole, conclusive agreement, by the way, whether internally in Iran or with Hezbollah. But there were certain interests. And the information that they found about al-Assad and his stubbornness not to get into a deal that would conclude everything that was proposed by Russia, Iran, and Turkey before the operation began of the opposition, certain information that was leaked that he betrayed them as well. All of that led to them not helping him. And that's why he fled. And Jimmy Eyes, is Yemen firing rockets at Zayo clouds again? No, not rockets for the meantime. So far, they declared that they began the sea operation against Israel, so blockade on every ship that is going to Israel or is linked with Israel. And that's problematic on its own, by the way. That's not something that, is easy. That's very serious. And as a matter of fact, it could probably be strategically correct not to start altogether with missiles, because it would show a slight overreaction, maybe. Not to say that, it's not justified. No, not one bit, I think action must have been taken beforehand to reach a solution. But in the current climate, they're saying, or the argument is, well, Israel is having a blockade, we'll have a blockade too. If they reach a level of war, or what Yemen could designate as war, they will start to attack. But also you need to remember one thing too. The moves of Ansarullah, they're coordinated with the Palestinian resistance. So today, before they started to attack, they got a verification. They will get a verification from the Palestinian resistance. And then they will, of course, continue. And Max, thank you as well, my friend. Much appreciated. Thank you so much for your participation. Let's go to your next question. And again, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them, otherwise some of them will be missed. Jimmy Eyes, you're saying something. If you want to know the truth about things, just believe the opposite of what the US and Israel says. I think that's true to a very large extent. That's what I would say. But I think to know the truth, it requires effort, my friend. That's the only thing that I can tell you. It doesn't come easy. It doesn't come on a golden plate with a silver spoon. And you're not spoon-fed truth. You need to go and dig hard and put an effort and put in work in to find the truth. and face hardship and difficulties to find the truth. It doesn't come easy. It doesn't come like that. And even sometimes when either Israel or the US or Satan himself tries to pretend that they're saying the truth. Do you understand what I mean? So, yeah, and I mean, we're living in an age where there is a lot of misinformation. And although I would say social media helped balance things where, you know, the source of knowledge isn't just in the hands of corporate media, we need to understand that there is money and there is reach behind social media too. And unfortunately, people can be dragged into misinformation on social media too, which would have the same negative effects of corporate or mainstream media. So all I would advise is, if you really want the truth, or what's closest to it really, because we as human beings, we're constant knowledge seekers, you need to have a long breath, dig, and struggle really hard with it, and constantly be aware, and constantly have your guard, and constantly be thorough, and constantly scrutinize and analyze and look for sources so that you can get the clear picture. And I take that very seriously, especially because I'm a person who constantly, brings information to people. And I think, though, individually, we owe that to ourselves. We owe that to ourselves because, like I said, it doesn't come, that easily like that. And you need to constantly struggle to get it. And Tashikoma is saying, what's the situation in the West Bank? It's very, very, very bad, unfortunately. Israel is still having these operations in the West Bank. And I spoke about the report earlier on today about the unfortunate killing that came from the Palestinian Authority against a young man who was resisting Israel, and how problematic that is. And now, if you talk about Israel on its own, they're destroying roads. They killed approximately 1,000 people in the West Bank in the past 15 months. That's apart from their daily killings before the 7th of October. They have imprisoned thousands. They have displaced over 50,000 people. They constantly destroy homes. What do they not do? What do they not do? And that's a systematic plan to make their lives miserable so that they can flee. So they can flee the West Bank. So the situation is not really good in the West Bank. And the harsh truth is, even if we have a solution in Gaza, it's not going to look better for the West Bank. The West Bank there's still going to be a problem up until a genuine core solution is reached. And mind over matter, do you think Israel and US planning to attack Iran? And if they do, what will be the consequences? World War III. I think it's Israel who wants Iran to be attacked. It's Israel and the Israeli lobby who's been pushing the United States for many of the wars. That's, of course, no excuse for the United States, but it shows how much of a strong lobby the Zionist lobby is in America. There were videos circulating of Netanyahu before the invasion of Iraq, trying to lobby the Congress on how important it is for everyone, the whole world, for the US to attack Iraq. And they have the money, they have the reach, they have the compromised people, they have the blackmail network, and the post or pre-Epstein networks too as well, to force people to go into these wars. And the United States as a government, as a system, or like as a mass corporation, to be more accurate really, has the back doors, even legally, to do these things. So long as that lobby exists and that money exists and that vulnerability inside of the US, all of them are there is a danger to a war in Iran. However, is the United States interested? I don't really believe so. I believe that despite Benjamin Netanyahu trying to lobby, and despite the tensions reaching sky-high levels twice, in April 2024 and in October 2024, with Iranian attacks and, Iranian responses, not, because they were responses to Israeli aggressions and Israeli retaliations again, or more aggressions against Iran. The US at the time even said that, we're not going to participate with you in a war, but we will help you defend yourselves. Now, Trump isn't looking like he wants to have wars. Trump is withdrawing from Syria. That's it. That's what led the SDF to reach an agreement. Now we're part of the reason too, alongside other assurances. Trump, when he came in, we had a ceasefire. I mean, there's no denying that. And again, these things are no endorsements to anyone, by the way. This is saying exactly the facts as they happen. So when Trump came in, we had a ceasefire. Joe Biden did not go to a ceasefire all this time. And I'm not sure he's interested, to be quite frank with you. Iran is preparing. They're having a drill with China and Russia soon, a naval drill. Iran, Russia, and China. Iran is constantly preparing and boosting its air defense systems, its attack capabilities, strategic missile capabilities, strategic cooperation with Russia and China. BRICS coordination is increasing too, to counter any sort of sanctions, because they also, financial war is war too, it's not just bombs. Financial war is war. And China's ready too. China told them we're ready for any war, trade war, financial war, or any other type of war. And look at what's happening with the biggest war now in Europe. That's it. Now it's heading towards the ending of the war. Today there were talks about the Russian and Ukrainian side agreeing on a preliminary basis to have a month of a ceasefire, moving on or leading to a comprehensive peace process. That's after the US, stopped supporting them, and the United States as well stopped giving them weapons. And despite all of the backing from European states or other members of the NATO. And again, that shows you how much division there is in the NATO as an organization, because some people, when they say NATO, it's as if, they're all united. They're not. They aren't. Especially with the head now, with the head of the NATO, opposing other countries who are supposed to be most affected by the Russian threats. Europe is seeing a neglect now, or some European countries, rather than actually looking in the mirror and realizing that they have been a front to the US. Not that they're left to their own. No, they could deal with Russia. They can have deals with Russia on their own. And it'll be better for them and more secure for their future, by the way. So I think it's quite unlikely. It's quite unlikely. But, that's the key thing here. So long as Israel's there with the same recipe, supremacy and apartheid and oppression and killing, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem. So long as they exist. Lydia, in all seriousness, why does the Middle East help Gaza in the West Bank in stopping this? Why doesn't Egypt just drive the food through Dubai, stop oil, etc.? I think it's the unfortunate reality of how these governments primarily are, rather than the populations. The deals that they have with Israel and their lack of willingness or interest to do something that would even diplomatically challenge, right? Because even at the diplomatic or financial challenge levels, we haven't seen sufficient enough action. And when I say diplomatic leverage, let's say before say, helping Gaza, for example, and that is a reference of how they can help them, by the way. Ultimatum to Israel and the United States of cutting all ties if you continue to facilitate and support this genocide. That didn't happen. And why doesn't Egypt drive the food through? That's also a very nice question, and that's a problem. Because, well, their excuse is they can't breach, but number one, Israel's on the border now. So they're not opening it. Egypt said, I don't want to deal with you on the border because that will create a precedent where Egypt is recognizing Israeli sovereignty on the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing, and that's something that they don't want to do. From their perspective, that's problematic because they know what Israel will do afterwards. They will legitimize this presence forever. And they will use this moment as an excuse forever that you dealt with us when we were on the Philadelphia corridor. So there is no problem and there is no excuse for you to say now that you can't deal with us. Egypt knows them. And that's very problematic. On the other hand, if they wanted to go somewhere else, they would be risking a war. And they don't want to risk a war. That's the only thing. And again, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? That's a separate story. However, I mean, the actual developments, the talks about a ceasefire, they're going pretty well, by the way. They're going pretty well with at least the confirmations that are coming from the United States administration wanting to end the war, and the Palestinian resistance saying that the talks actually began and we're headed towards a phase 2 that will end the war. All of these things are very important. All of that shows that we are on the way to de-escalation. But the biggest problem is Netanyahu and his timeline and him not having problems up until the next elections. He doesn't want to have to face early elections with the criminal charges now against him. He's using the fact that he's in this position now to avoid court hearings or to go to the court hearing and have an excuse to get out of the court hearing because some sort of an urgent situation happened that he all of a sudden needs to deal with. He doesn't want to lose any of that. Once he is out, that's it. Gullyburg, does the occupation allow Palestinians to travel to the Jordan? Yes, but they will ban some of them. For example, in the past several weeks, we saw them banning families of Palestinian prisoners who were released and expelled to third countries from going and seeing their loved ones. They said, it happened with others, as in they were allowed. Others were not allowed. But the things that you need to understand is Israel controls all of the West Bank border checkpoints between the West Bank and Jordan. Israel has full security control. And what they're doing now, by the way, and that's something very important for you to know, they are increasing their military presence in all of these areas. Again, despite the fact that they have a peace treaty with Jordan. Of course, they had attacks from people from Jordan coming into the West Bank and, carrying out these operations. And some Israeli security forces were killed in these operations. But now they're taking it to another level. They're increasing presence, and they are saying that they want to build a very big wall to completely stop any sort of, smuggling or what have you, despite the fact that they have been there. Splattered the news that Ben Gvir is introducing a bill to annul the Oslo Agreement. What are your thoughts? Well, the Oslo Agreement has only been serving Israel. It hasn't been serving the Palestinians in any way, shape, or form. But the reasons that Ben Gvir wants to annul the Oslo Agreement are different than the reasons that the Palestinians want to annul or calling for at least a review of the whole Oslo Agreement. Ben Gvir wants to annul the Oslo Agreement so that there would be no Palestinian Authority. However, what he doesn't understand, because he's politically an imbecile and very, very stupid, is that this Oslo Agreement is what's keeping everything in check for the security of Israel. That's what he doesn't understand. And that without the Oslo Accords, there would be more problems for Israel, because Israel would be stripped of any sort of excuse globally. Because you would have a fact. Israel is de facto controlling Gaza and the West Bank. People are living under apartheid, and there is no anything called the Palestinian Authority or anything as such. And the Israelis are, it would be an even more stripped, naked version of Israeli apartheid. And that's what Israel tries to avoid. They want to have a nicely clothed apartheid by having a Palestinian Authority and a Palestinian president with barely any kind of governor powers. What governor? I mean, basic, council employee powers at the end of the day. But I think from a Palestinian perspective, I mean, this is what it has done. The Oslo Accords only legitimize more and more Israeli aggression, expansion. When they signed the Oslo Accords in 1993, there were 100,000 illegal squatters in the West Bank. Now there's approximately 1 million. Land grabbing expanded so much. More administrative detention, more killings, more checkpoints, more stolen lands, more walls, more oppression, more of everything negative for the Palestinian people. And despite all of that, by the way, Israel is still killing people in the West Bank. That's for the people who said, that's why they attacked Gaza, because there's Hamas in Gaza. So, and anyway, without that even, there was a bill that passed in Israel during the genocide that already said that it's illegal, basically, in Israel to accept any Palestinian state. And it passed with a very large majority. And you need to understand, the people in power in Israel now, they deny that there are Palestinian people. They deny the history, And funny enough, they're the same people who changed their names, like Milikovsky, Netanyahu. Smotrich didn't change his name. He's still named after a town in Ukraine where his father comes from. And the others as well, claiming that there are no Palestinian people. But I think that shows you how far these people are, inside of Israel. But I think he's now not that relevant because he's out of the government. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another live stream. Thank you so much for everyone who participated in the chat and shared your comments and thoughts as well, and questions. Anyone who sent supers as well, thank you very much for your support, Samba and Max and anyone else. In the meantime, I'll hopefully have 1 or 2 segments for you, videos after this. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed, take care, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone.